Welcome to Breakthrough Consciousness,
the podcast where we get out of the loop and into it all.
I'm Clayton.
And my name is Sean.
And today we're going to be touching just a little bit more on our intentions and why we're wishing and willing to bring this forward into the public eye.
Yeah, so this is essentially just another introductory episode. In the first episode, we gave a little bit of our personal background, where we're coming from, why we want to be creating this podcast. And today we just wanted to really highlight and underline what those specific intentions were and are for starting this podcast and why we feel it's important. So, Clay, do you want to just kind of give your take on what your intentions are with this podcast?
Most definitely. I mean, I feel like I can kind of speak for both of us to an extent when I say we really wanted to take some of these, what I would call higher discussions, and really ground them in and bring it into the heart space and a more centered focus and awareness. Because we all get really excited talking about such non-tangible topics, and really fuels us, gets us fired up mentally, but we want to take that really high energy and bring it in and ground it into our heart space and just make it a more concrete and tangible aspect to our daily lives here. And do you want to add a little bit to that?
I think it's kind of just honing in on that information age. You know, right now it's so easy for us to get our voices out there and be heard by our extended community. And I think that there's just so much out there. There's so much content. There's so much information. I want to kind of hone in on the gold within that and really bring it into action. You know, I want to get past the infotainment type of paradigm and get more into heart-filled discussions, like you said, taking those intellectual ideas and really bringing them into the center of our being and grounding them into our realities.
Exactly. To where they're still a high-powered, high-octane thought.
Yeah, high energy.
But like you're saying, we really want to be able to walk with it and move with it and actually integrate these into part of our physical experience here.
Precisely. I mean, that high energy, that high octave that you're speaking of, I mean, a simple way of putting that is literally just the realm of ideas, the intellectual energy. Whether that be a, heady subject or just gossiping, it's still ideas. And to bring that into the physical realm of like, okay, say we were gossiping about someone. What's the point of doing that? You know, there could be a point if you take that discussion and think, all right, well, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Maybe I see something in them that I admire or that disgusts me, and maybe that'll, influence my own actions and how I'm going to portray myself.
Kind of seeing life as that mirror that it really is. And, instead of, back to, say, the gossiping and whatnot, we might be talking about someone or something that we either agree or disagree with. But it's seeing that and then using that heartfelt center to realize, well, I'm actually seeing something that I'm feeling, doing, perceiving within my own self. Because we're not going to be perceiving anything outside of ourselves that we don't already have a piece of within us, of course.
Exactly. I mean, we literally cannot perceive things that our psyche hasn't already had some relationship to. I mean, sure, I guess there are ways of breaking through those patterns and seeing things that are truly novel in our own experience. But day-to-day reality, we only see the aspects of other people that we've seen within ourselves.
For the most part, yeah. And
it's funny how that turns into judgment. And so many times, that we are annoyed with other people, so many times that's actually reflecting something about ourselves that maybe we haven't wanted to look at or really integrate into our being, into our experience, maybe move past or refine in some way or another.
Truly. So our intentions here with that communication is just to allow it to be what it is, a clear and open reflection and dynamic that we're able to not just have an idea or a thought about, but have an actual felt presence of and a centered awareness and movement with these ideas. We don't just want to give a bunch of information and let everyone do what they will with it, which is, I mean, definitely a large part of it, but we want to have some actual movement and steps and some grounding action to where we're going to be able to share this in a way that will actually benefit, change, and help evolve ourselves in the world.
Essentially. And that's really what we mean by breakthrough consciousness, is using that conscious awareness, and bringing it into breakthroughs in our own personal lives, whether that be getting through comfort zone limitations that keep us in a self that we're wanting, desiring, ready to move past, or whether it just be breakthroughs in intellectual understandings. And like, even as we started this podcast, we've done a couple episodes so far, and we decided to release this one as the second one. And in those discussions, we came to this realization that this podcast really is all about that heart center. And I'll admit that was a breakthrough for me personally, to even create that point of reference and to really feel into what it's like to have conversations with my awareness primarily being in my heart space rather than in my mind.
Right, because I feel like when we came together, we had a lot of these really like high mentally fueled conversations, and until we actually sat down and I guess to an extent dissected these conversations, like what is it that really feels good? Like, yeah, we want to record this, we want to get this out there and move forward with this, but when we tried to totally script what we were going to go through with, like, it lost a big chunk of it. So we sat down together again, and we're like, so what are we actually moving forward with? And we came to that space within ourselves just one more time again, that is, oh wow, it is this connection within the heart space. And you might even ask, like, what is the heart space? It is that centered, connected, it is between the ground and the sky. It's where we're operating through, for lack of better terms, both of these worlds simultaneously. It is truly like a centered awareness, a place where we just are and are able to be and communicate without feeling judged, feeling that negative connotation to the gossip. It is where we truly are seeing through the eyes of the reflections.
And quite literally, it's the vital center that keeps the whole engine running. Without our hearts beating and blood circulating, that life force energy circulating throughout our whole nervous system, our brain and our mind, we tend to correlate the brain and the mind. That's a different discussion, whether or not that's accurate or not. But, we tend to think of the brain as this computing identification center, so many of us are identified with our minds,
right,
and our thoughts.
It's almost like, though, to an extent, sorry to halt you, but if we can look at the brain as more of the transmitter, receiver for the mind itself, just how we kind of can tune in mentally and pick up on these different ideas. We give less of all the power that is the mind to just that one small part of ourself that is able to transmit and receive on those levels.
Right. And my whole point being that it's through the heart's source that we're even able to do that.
Without that blood pumping and flowing and life force moving through, there
Exactly.
will be no brain activity and no thoughts to be had.
As far as we can tell. I mean, we can kind of explore a little bit on that kind of topics later, but just to reel it in, we just wanted to acknowledge that let's just take a moment right here and just get everyone on the same page. Why don't you and I and anyone listening to this just recognize that here we are, breathing and sustaining our physical beings, and just take a minute to take a couple deep, fulfilling breaths.
Truly.
Just feel into that heart space and the okayness with just being here and present in this moment right now.
Breathing in deep, allowing ourselves to fill ourselves up with any and all in which we need, and exhaling, releasing, letting go, being heard, and just allowing any of those thoughts, feelings, actions that we know aren't truly us at that core to pass with our breath. It's truly such a transformative tool that we have and that we use constantly without even consciously realizing it. And that brings me to another point here where, like, it's all started with us. Really, it was just an informal therapy, as Sean described it at one point when we were talking, as this connection that we're having. Like, yeah, we're talking with each other. We're getting to these really centered moments, and that's a space where we're vulnerable and open and respectful of each other and
fully
allowing.
present.
Yeah, that's another really important part of what being in the heart space is. I feel like a more present sense of being. We're not getting caught up in different streams of thought or these loops and patterns, and just why we're here, getting out of that loop and into it all right here in that heart space. And it's truly just a moment, a time, and a place that we want to set aside so that we can operate and heal and be more in this centered awareness of ourselves that I keep talking of.
Absolutely. But even as you're talking, man, I'm just sitting here soaking in it. I mean, doesn't it feel just delicious just to be in that space? And we can just sit here and listen to our voices ramble on and like not necessarily identify with those voices or the thoughts that are feeding them, but just being present in this body and allowing it all to channel and just trusting the flow of it.
Truly, it's so much less the weight that the words are carrying on a mental, understood level. It's so much more so like, does this vibe with you? Can you resonate with the movement that's happening here? And doesn't it feel good to just let go of all that burden of thought and just be fully being in that awareness of ourselves that just is?
Yeah, man, so true. And it's just funny too, because I mean, on one hand, we wanted to take a lot of time to really intellectually discuss and explain some of our key terms that we'll be using throughout the podcast. And in doing so, we realized that we were just getting so caught up in the intellectual. And what is my point here? I'm not even sure.
We were really just thinking too much about it instead of allowing it to flow and be and evolve in a creative process. We were really just taking the magic away by overanalyzing it,
right?
Which was a huge breakthrough moment for me, realizing like, wow, like this project totally blossomed from our connection and just us coming together. And I can't even explain it. Just such a rapid connection, and just blam, blossomed from the heart right there. So we got so excited. We were like, okay, what are we gonna do with this? So we went in and tried to mentally figure out every little aspect of it, and then we were like, nope, that's not gonna work. We have to go back to where it all started, and that was with that informal therapy of just being open and having kind of an idea of what we're talking about, but letting it flow.
Absolutely. That was my point, truly, is just how much better this feels to just like dive into the waters and just like swim in it and let whatever comes out come out, rather than, you know, being more focused on what we need to say, what the message needs to be, etc.
Not being afraid of being misunderstood, but being courageous enough to allow ourselves to put it out there for interpretation.
Yeah, true. I'm just trusting that it'll resonate in any way that it needs to, or any way that it doesn't need to, you know? And with all that said, I wanted to touch upon I just want to acknowledge that, you know, within the art form of podcasting, we're using our voices and our language to communicate as an art form to reach people. But the irony here is that I don't even consider myself a strong speaker. You know, I don't even revere language as really that powerful of a form of communication. At least I'll say it's not my favorite. It's not the most deep form of communication that I've experienced myself. But here we are using language and using our voices to communicate about its own limitations, you know?
Transcending it through itself.
Exactly. Because here it is. I mean, these are tools that we have to use. So I guess we kind of just realized that there is power in using this tool of communication to appeal to the mind of ourselves, first and foremost, each other, anyone listening, and using that to then point us to centering ourselves and being mindful and aware. I'm trying to think of a better way of saying mindfulness.
It's just really
body
what it is,
awareness.
though. Just awareness, mindfulness.
I guess I wish mindfulness evoked more of a physical quality.
True, but it's like I was saying earlier, we can't limit the mind to the brain when it is a lot of times just the transmitter and receiver. Because
Right.
one of the teachings of the Kabbalion, which is a Hermetic philosophy, and back to like Hermes Trismegistus or whatever, a lot of occult esoteric kind of knowledge was. But one of the universal laws of the Kabbalion, which was kind of like a set of rules and regulations for how the universe operates. And I think the first rule, the first law was the universe is mental, the mind is all. So it's kind of showing that it is like, but not in the brain getting lost in that kind of sense. It's just kind of showing that it is all really this one connected being. The mind kind of being the greater all that is not exactly physical, but manifest into physical reality. Where I feel like connecting in the center space of the heart allows us even more operations of the mind than being totally up in the brain. But that is another topic that we can really
there's many
break
things I
down.
want to say about that, but I think we will be better to leave that for an episode within itself.
Yeah, we can definitely break that down a little bit more in the future because Hermetic philosophy is really cool.
Yeah, I would like to hear more about it. It's not something I'm very familiar with, but what I do hear from what you're saying is kind of the dialect between mind versus matter. You know, what comes first? Chicken or the egg type scenario. And we're definitely planning on talking about
That's
that in
the
depth.
platypus.
But not today. But anyway, I suppose my point is literally just that, you know, language is limited. And the irony is that we're using that language to point out its own limitations and to then carry that forth in the way that we communicate with other people and the way that we communicate with ourselves. You know, so many times we get so caught up in the mind that we don't even necessarily think about how, you know, you might mean one thing by what you say, but depending on how you say it, tone of voice, and the
Body
words you
tone,
choose,
and even the state of mind the person that is receiving what's being said is and can totally affect the entire conversation.
Exactly my point. Yeah, you don't really necessarily know how someone else is picking up what you're putting out. I think a lot of us assume that people are reading us the same way that we feel, but you know, getting really clear about the way we present ourselves and the way we communicate is so important to putting out those messages.
Exactly, and why putting the heart space on a pedestal once more is so important, because being in that space of such a more open and clean state of self, which I feel the heart provides, allows us to be better understood and better use these tools of communication to extend and expand so far beyond what the mind's idea of communication can do. Because if we look at it from a mental level of operation in the brain, it is to an extent made to just figure out what is, analyze, divide, and break apart until it can understand these things at base concepts and levels. Whereas the heart space, many teachings across different religions, occult and esoteric knowledge, teaches that this is the space of centered awareness of self and acceptance of what is. So it's like this heart space really has more capabilities of experiencing what is without judging and breaking it down, so we're able to better communicate all of that.
And experiencing what is unified from being to being, because in the mind we all have each have our understanding and perceptions of what this puzzle is looking like. We've pulled these pieces from different life experiences, different teachings, different indoctrinations that we've gone through, etc., and we think that we have a idea of what truth is. But I mean, go hug a stranger, go hug your mom, you know,
and feel
when you
all
have that
these
heart-to-heart
different truths.
communication, that truth is just there. You're not I mean, if you have such a deep heart communication in a hug or in whatever, I mean, that is such a deeper form of communicating conscious energy from one being to the other. A lot of times, if it's deep enough, I'll forget who I am, you know? I'll like totally just be in that moment of just feeling blissfully connected to my surroundings, you know? It's not Sean hugging, you know, his mom or whatever. It's just, it's divine energy just manifest.
That
That's such a flowery way of putting it, but it's just all that comes to mind.
Flowery but beautiful. I want a bouquet of that. It's just exactly letting go of that individual separate idea of self and moving forward with our already oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And
truly,
I think this is a good moment for what we like to do, which is our takeaway step, and a little bit of something we can put into action is next time you're hugging somebody, think about it beforehand and put your head on the right side of their head, and that'll help our hearts connect physically, heart to heart. With our head on the right side, our physical hearts, like our chests touching, like that is where our hearts lie, and that's where they're going to connect. And take a deep breath and just really embrace that person that you're going to hug, and breathe in, release, let go, and hug as long as it feels good, and it's just going to keep feeling better, I promise.
But take an actual breath together. So many times, we, as a culture, we have a fear of touch and of physical intimacy, and I don't mean sexually necessarily. That's a whole can of worms and a different set of societal fears. But literally just, I guess my point is that so many times I feel like people give a hug and they just give one squeeze,
they
back
give a
off.
squeeze and then back off, but it's like almost we're afraid to allow that level of vulnerability to wash over us and let go of that, because the mind gets afraid. It doesn't want to let go, but once it does, we find a broader sense of self within this heart space that we keep mentioning. And it's as soon as we let go of that preconceived idea of individuality, we're totally in that state of oneness, embracing another being, but not even realizing that's what's going on. We're just feeling the vibrations at that point. As hippy-dippity up in the air and magical as it sounds, I promise it really is.
And that's where the action step comes into. So just to reiterate, we mentioned it in the first episode, but that's something we want to do with every episode. At the end, we want to have something that we can offer for people to really take into their lives. So next time you're engaging in a hug, just take it to that one step closer to conscious presence with another human being.
Just know, put it heart to heart, hold them tight, breathe together, and enjoy the embrace entirely.
Well, I think that's pretty much wraps up our intentions for this podcast. Thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll have more for you next time.
Until we get out of the loop and into it all again, much love.
Peace.